If you've been following my trek from east to west along the ancient Silk Road in Uzbekistan, I've come roughly 140 miles from Samarkand to the city of Bukhara. With a population of about 300,000, Bukhara is little more than half the size of Samarkand, and it's booming with new construction. But the modern portion of the city is not why visitors come here. They come for old Bukhara, whose history dates back 2,500 years and whose relatively quiet streets feel like an oasis of tranquility. I'm walking in a lovely park in the center of the city, surrounded by 3, 4, maybe 5 former madrasas. Practically all of them have been converted to commercial use without impact on some of the more historic buildings that are part of the World Heritage Site. They make delightful venues for restaurants, cafes, and small merchants. I've come inside the courtyard of one of these madrasas because it's early morning. It's not so in use, but will fill up as the day progresses, and especially in the late afternoons and evenings. Many of the visitors here are part of tour groups, undoubtedly due to the geography of the place being toward the middle of the vast steppe from Tashkent, extending all the way to the west to Khiva, the farthermost outpost on this glorious stretch of Silk Road cities in Uzbekistan. People arrive here on comfort buses. They also come by train and join tour groups. In my humble opinion, there's no better way to travel across Uzbekistan than on the train. Uzbekistan's railway system is excellent and comfortable, not to mention inexpensive. I've come to the most impressive of the antiquities sites that still stand in Bukhara, Poi Kalan. This is a complex that includes a great mosque in whose courtyard I'm walking, along with a great madrasa that is just outside this mosque grounds on the opposite side of an exterior courtyard, and then perhaps the most famous minaret in all of Central Asia. This gigantic mosque was completed in the year 1514, rebuilt after a previous mosque, and other structures on this site were destroyed by Genghis Khan in the year 1220. But long before the original Islamic buildings that stood here were plundered, this spot was a center for Zoroastrianism, going back to before the 7th century CE and the advent of Islam, during another age of Bukhara's varied history. This is quite an incredible building on the inside, but not much of it is available to the public. Currently, it's undergoing renovation, so much of the interior hallways are closed off. The great Poi Kalan madrasa that faces the mosque, and which you can see behind me, is noteworthy for a couple of reasons. Built in 1535, it's one of the only madrasas in all of Central Asia that has functioned continuously as a madrasa since its construction, and continues to do so today. That's amazing when you think about it, considering that during the Soviet era, countless Islamic religious schools and other religious institutions were shuttered. But this one, alone in Central Asia, was left open. This is not really a tourist destination, although plenty of visitors poke their heads into the lobby area. Between the mosque and the madrasa is the signature historic landmark of Bukhara. the Great Minaret. It dates to 1127, almost a century before the Mongol invasion. Genghis Khan was so admiring of it, he spared it from destruction. The sheer scale of this minaret has caused historians to conclude that it was built for more than merely religious purposes, that is, as the usual place for an imam to climb up to call the faithful to prayer. Rather, it is understood to have been a political statement of the ruling emir to pronounce his own power. But there's something else that sets this minaret apart. It came to be known as the Tower of Death. That's because for several centuries it was used as a place of execution for convicted criminals who were tossed off the top while alive. The vibe here in the old section of the city is almost that of a small town. Relaxed, peaceful, not overrun with tourists in the least. It's as if you were in a historically accurate movie set, a living, breathing, functioning community from a bygone era, only without the crush of people, or for that matter, not even much traffic on the narrow streets to spoil the mood. I arrived here a couple of days ago, and I must say I've been pleasantly surprised. From the time I checked into my family-run guest house, the Menorah Kurd, I've felt absolutely relaxed.
The accommodations here, on a quiet street in the heart of the old town, and with helpful hosts and a marvelous breakfast, couldn't have been more pleasant.
Like other cities of the Silk Road, Bukhara has a long and rich history involving several civilizations. Since at least 500 years before Christ, it has served as a center of trade, scholarship, culture, and religion. The overwhelming majority of people here, about 88%, are Sunni Muslim, with about 9% Eastern Orthodox and 3% other. But there's a long history of religious and cultural toleration here as well, owing to the fact that, like other cities of the Silk Road, a variety of peoples have both passed through and settled here. One of the lovely things about Bukhara is that you can get lost in one of these neighborhoods, and then when you least expect it, come upon an antiquity site of great value. This is the Chor Minor, a former madrasa, or what's left of it, built by a wealthy person in the early 19th century. It was constructed in 1807, and it's beautiful and unusual.
So I'm walking up one of these towers. Pay a very modest fee to do that down at the bottom. It's a little over $1 US. This is the only one of the 4 towers that's accessible. Looking down on the courtyard, but here are the steps going up. These steps are what you call head knockers. You have to bend over to avoid knocking your head against a solid piece of stone. I haven't seen a structure like this, and there's reputed to be none like it in all of Central Asia. It is literally what's left of an old madrasa, a gatehouse with these 4 towers that stand up above it, their beautiful blue tile domes, none of which are minarets. Rather, 3 of them are said to have been built for storage, with the 4th containing a staircase, the one that I came up. The rest of the building has long since disappeared. Stop to have what I hope to be is a delicious lunch. The Old Bukhara restaurant. Ordered a pastafa, which is a traditional soup with rice and vegetables, meat, served with sour cream, along with a rice and vegetable dish, and of course the ubiquitous traditional Uzbek bread. This soup is absolutely delicious. It is just what I was wanting. Thin shreds of beef with vegetables, some carrots, some spices.
There are no shortages of places to eat or shop in the Old Quarter, whether along the streets or in the bazaar.
Hello, how are you? Great, thank you. These kids study English, obviously, in elementary school all across Uzbekistan, and you know it no matter where you go, because there are children who approach you in the streets in every city and town who want to try out their English on you. So you're never far from a welcoming committee here. There's no place that better illustrates Bukhara's long off and on independence than this massive fortress known as the Ark of Bukhara. It's been a landmark since at least the 5th century. So I purchased my ticket, 40,600 some, which is less than about $4 US. Made a couple of turns and I still see no wide open expanses. It's more like the street of an old city in here. But I have the feeling that down at the end of this alleyway where I'm walking, I'll be able to see a greater expanse of it. This was not what I was expecting. It is a giant archaeological ruin in here. And when I say ruin, I mean largely unexcavated. What they have done is created walkways, steering one around the edges of the fort itself, so that you can get up to the parapet walls and look over the side. Bukhara's residents fled to this fortress in the 1200s, most famously when the city came under siege from the great Mongol conqueror Genghis Khan. The Mongols eventually got their way, ransacking the city and destroying much of the fort. But this fortress probably suffered its single greatest destruction in the early 20th century. That is during the Russian Revolution, when in 1920, during the Battle of Bukhara, Red Army troops under the command of Mikhail Frunze left the fort in ruins after airplanes bombarded it. At the time, Bukhara was still being ruled by an emir who managed to escape to Afghanistan with the royal treasury. Some say that part of the fort's destruction was due to explosions ordered by the emir himself, so that its sacred places, including the harem, couldn't be defiled. Frunze, by the way, is the same military commander I mentioned in an earlier video who was a
friend of Stalin's, and for whom Stalin renamed the capital of Kyrgyzstan for his efforts during the revolution. Of course, when the Soviet Union dissolved, the capital's name was changed back to Bishkek. But even today, Bishkek's airport goes by the official lettering of FRU, for Franz. One of the few structures still standing inside this fort. It's a small mosque from the 1800s. I'll stick my head inside and take a look around. The age of this mosque tells us two things. One, that it wasn't here when Genghis Khan invaded. But secondly, and most importantly, it survived the Bolshevik air raids. Even at a building such as this, which is largely intact, there is rubble all around, just lying in the open, individual bricks and stones, some with markings on them from who knows when, probably from the construction of this mosque. I know earlier perhaps than the 1800s, but just a work in progress here, archaeologically speaking. Fortress property is nearly 10 acres. Just looking at it in ruins like this and walking through it, you get to put your imagination into play. At the front of this court complex are the only real complete structures here. This is the former emir's coronation hall. It is being used as a museum with a number of works of art under glass scattered about it. In the center is a religious manuscript, again under glass, from the 8th century.
As with the other places I visited along the Silk Road thus far, Bukhara is most enchanting at sunset and beyond. Nowhere is that more evident than in the Poi Kalan, where people gather nightly to view the storied landmarks bathed in spectacular light. It's quite the Silk Road memory, mysterious and magical.